All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you on this Monday, June the 15th, and joining us on the UMA guest line to talk a little Niner ball is one of our favorite guys, Ryan Fowler, formerly of the Draft Network, now with NBC Sports Philadelphia, and he's a great follow on X at _Ryan Fowler _ and he's with us on the UMA guest line to chop it up and talk some off-season ball. Ryan, how are you?
Doing good, Larry. Always appreciate you having me on, man, and hope your summer is off to a great start.
Yeah, no, it's going good. And you were covering the Commanders, and now you're covering, you're from that part of the world, and now you're covering the Eagles in Philadelphia for NBC Sports Philadelphia. Exciting times for you, huh?
Very exciting. Very exciting. Obviously, an East Coast guy, ties that are in the NFC East deep into years ago, but obviously always will have my fingerprints on the entire NFL. And as you know, out there in the West Coast, really for me, I think it's the best division in football heading into 26, and always fun to talk Niners football with you.
Well, you know how much I love talking draft and draft prospects. And you had a tweet, about a week ago or so, where you said checking in with some folks around football and some names as standouts from the OTA period. And you list about 15 names here. And one of them was 49er linebacker Jaden Duggar. So, Rye, tell us what you've heard about Jaden Duggar. I thought he was pretty impressive at the 49er minicamp, among others.
Yeah, absolutely. Very unique player. And I think when you look at the path to snaps, if you will, for Jaden, I think it's going to be as a potential multi-phase contributor, meaning a guy that can give you some snaps in the middle of the football field, is a long, versatile, athletic player, really checks the boxes, if you will, as far as a guy that can play complementary football to Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, whatever they want to do against different personnel packages. And then obviously fly down the field with your hair on fire as a former safety that can make plays on special team. So again, that multi-phase type of contributor. So I don't expect him right now to have, hey, week 1, week 2, be on the field for 50% of the snaps. He's obviously, of course, got to make the roster first, which I fully expect him to, then carve out a role. But I think when you look at his game in the modern trends of the NFL, as far as countering different offenses where they want to have 2 tight ends on the field, both guys at 6'4", 6'5", that can run 4.5 or 4.6, you have to have more athletes on the football field. And as you know, Larry, I don't need to go into the injury details the past few years for the Niners. You can never have enough depth. And I think for Jaden Duggar's perspective for 2026 and moving forward, he's a guy I'm extremely excited to watch in that defense, learn behind Fred Warner, and maybe in the next 2-3 years of his career, maybe become a substantial type of rotational piece there for Kyle Shanahan's group.
He's an interesting guy because he, as you said, he played safety at Georgetown. Then he played, they used him at Louisiana. I saw DeZormo, the head coach there, said, hey, we played him as an off the ball linebacker, but then we could walk him up onto the line of scrimmage and let him rush the passer. And he gives, Raheem Morris in this case, or whatever defensive coordinator he's playing for, an opportunity to kind of, show one look pre-snap and kind of rotate into something else post-snap. He's got that versatility. Where do you think a guy like Duggar makes his bones in the NFL? Do you think he's a special teamer? Do you see him as a 5-man front edge rusher? Is he a off-the-ball linebacker? He did wear the green dot last year. He made 125 tackles as an off-the-ball linebacker for Louisiana. Where do you see him really, making an impact?
In 2026 and moving forward, Larry, you don't see a lot of defenses that want to live, whether that's in base or whether that's in sub, as far as with 3 linebackers on the football field. But I think when you look at beyond Fred Warner in this defense, I know there's obviously still some questions about what Nick Martin can be or what Tatum Bethune can be, both guys as well that can really run, that are versatile in their alignment. When you look at Jaden Duggar, I mentioned the length earlier, the versatility you talked about as far as the background as a safety. When you play at 20 yards of depth as a safety, and now you're coming into 5 yards or 10 yards of depth as a linebacker, sometimes things can even slow down a little bit for you. Whereas some other guys, or they're even coming to the line of scrimmage, it can speed up for them. When I think of Jaden Duggar's tape, watching him at Louisiana, he's a guy that utilized his length extremely well. He tackled his tail off. You mentioned the 100-plus tackles. I don't think right now I would pigeonhole him into a specific role. I think he's such a young guy right now in this loaded depth chart up top at the linebacker position to where he can really find a niche somewhere, to whether he's a third linebacker on the field. You bring him in on a 3rd and 8 to cover a tight end because he has that safety background. I think he's such a versatile player to where you allow him, if you're Raheem Morris, Kyle Shanahan, to put your athletes in space. And that's what I think Jaden Duggar is going to be best at. But right away, for Niners fans out there saying, when am I going to see number 53 on the football field? I expect him to be as a special teams core contributor right away.
Ryan Fowler with us on the UMA guest line as we chop it up on the Niners in the offseason. All right, we haven't done an interview since the draft, so I haven't heard your thoughts on what the 49ers got done. There were some people that were very critical of the 49ers draft and felt like they reached all day for guys they could have gotten. Other people are a little bit more like, hey, you know what? They got guys that they wanted, and, maybe some people are not as concerned about draft value. I think it's pretty clear that the 49ers put a lot of focus on their assistant coaches. Their assistant coaches have a lot of say in the personnel evaluation thing, including the draft. What did you think of? Why don't we walk through their draft? It was Deshaun Stribling, it was Romelo Height, and Kalon Black on Niners had 3 picks on day 2. What did you think of those 3 guys, Stribling, Height, and Black?
Yeah, I'll start off at the top, and I'll go one by one there. And I think Deshaun Stribling is going to be a heck of a football player, because I think right away, I don't know, Larry, if we see Mike Evans week 1 in Australia. I think when the Niners have that week 2, week 3, week 4 stretch at home, that's probably when you see him, if I had to guess right now. I think when you look on the outside, Ricky Pearsall's finally healthy for now. I'm knocking on wood as I'm saying that for you guys. Christian Kirk is your wide receiver 3 or 4. You have some speed options in Watkins and Jacob Cowing, but when you look at Deshaun Stribling, and I think what made him really rise astronomically on teams' boards as the process went on, is when you have a big physical player like that. You watched him attack the football in the SEC. He's a natural hands catcher. He plays to his size. And I think for me as well, on evaluating receivers, can you understand the smaller nuances of the game with separation, not just pressing your foot in the ground, trying to win 35 yards downfield that draws the ooh and ahs. In an NFC battle against the Seattle Seahawks in November, can you win a route on a 3rd and 5 and you got to move the sticks and seal a corner on your back hip? You got to be able to do that. So I think when watching Deshaun Stribling, I think it's an excellent value. I had a late day 1 grade on Deshaun Stribling. I think he's going to come in right away and compete for top 2 or 3 targets in this offense. I know there's a lot of names. There's only one ball to go around, but I really do like Deshaun Stribling in this offense.
I do too. It's funny too, because I think the 49ers, there were 2 takeaways as they left Lumen Field. One is their receivers got so little separation, it was startling. And it really didn't show itself until I watched the All-22 back a few days after and saw, wow, look at these receivers were glued to the Seattle defensive backs. I think Stribling will give them some big playability. But the other thing was the 49er defense or offensive line really got worked up front by Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams, and I thought they really could use some help there, and I don't know that they got it. But let's talk a little bit about Romelo Height. What did you think about Height? Chris Kasarik knows Texas Tech football pretty well. The Niners love what they've seen so far in the minicamp from Height. A lot of people are projecting him to be a very productive rookie. What did you think of him coming out of Texas Tech?
There were a couple questions with Romelo I wanted to see him answer in 2025 at Texas Tech. And the reason why I say that is, you add Lee Hunter, you bring in David Bailey from Stanford. So Romelo at times in his past, even at Georgia Tech, where I wanted to see him win consistently, even when guys would make him rush twice, meaning, hey, I got to beat a tight end and then I got to beat a tackle. But in this defense, you can't just put a guy and say, hey, look, this is Romelo Height in any defense. You got to project him to the fit and the players around him. And when looking at that, and with that in consideration, looking at this defense with a healthy Nick Bosa, a healthy Mykel Williams, I'm pumped to see what Alfred Collins, CJ West, Osa Odigizua coming over from Dallas, how those guys are going to allow Romelo Height to win in isolation, meaning he's going to see one-on-one reps. And watching him at times as far as the explosiveness and the speed, I know Bailey get all the attention on the other side, but Romelo Height was an explosive football player that could win outside. He could win inside. And watching him at the Senior Bowl up close and personal, he also showcased the ability to go through an offensive lineman's chest plate as well. So you're really threatening all 3 angles there. So I think he's going to be a DPR early in his career, designated pass rusher for those unfamiliar with that term, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, a little bit longer. Not a guy you're going to expect on the field early on to stop the run, but you already have guys for that. So again, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s longer in his career early on, but I think he's going to be a young, quick, explosive player at his time. He's going to keep him fresh, really keep that rotation going behind Nick Bosa and company.
If you told me the 49ers were going to have a lot of leads, I would say I love Romelo Height. I think he's a much better player with a lead. I think he's a finisher that helps you finish out games if you have a lead. Now, if you don't have a lead and it's the second half and they're running a big back at you, I don't know that he's going to step in and stand in against the run and really make plays. But I love him as a finisher. I love him as a speed threat coming off the edge, and I really love him opposite Nick Bosa. How about Kalon Black? I think if there's one player that I would say has opened my eyes the most during the mini camp, it's probably Kalon Black, who I knew he was tough. I knew he had leg strength. I was so impressed by what he did at the Senior Bowl. But, I had no idea that this guy could catch the ball as well as he has. And I didn't have any idea that he had this kind of speed. He really looks fast on the practice field. Now, maybe even faster than his timed, stopwatch speed. What did you think of Kalon Black? I mean, to me, what his carries at the beginning of the Senior Bowl, where he's like pushing the pile and carrying the pile for 4 and 5 yards a pop on the first couple carries, especially he was only like 3 days off of, Indiana's last game. He easily could have skipped the entire event. Nobody would have said anything. Instead, he showed up and he played amazing. I was so impressed by what he did in Mobile.
Yeah, a lot of things you just said about Kaelon is just a guy that wants to compete, and I think in looking at just what the Niners are going to do in that running backs room this year, obviously you have the guy at the top, and I don't need to say his name. He's obviously going to be a guy, maybe 25, 30 touches a game in 2026. Whether the Niners are going to make that public or not, expect that here in 2026. And, of course, I want to see more from Jordan James. But Kalon Black is a guy that's going to compete his tail off. Whether you need him to be a bowling ball on 3rd and 2 and get a first down and hop up the football field, or you bring him in some pony personnel with 2 running backs on the field that you've seen a lot from teams like the Rams in the past, or you look at the Kansas City Chiefs with years past when they won the Super Bowl. I think Kalon Black is just a guy that really watching the Indiana Hoosiers, where Fernando Mendoza, of course, got all the attention. That dynamic defense with D'Angelo Pons in the back end got a lot of attention. But watching him and his toughness, his ability to win inside and outside the tackles, and then Larry, you mentioned it perfectly as far as with his hands. That's the ability to get on the field as a young player, to just provide Christian McCaffrey, to get a little bit of a breather, to compete with Jordan James sitting in his rearview mirror. I think Kalon Black is going to be one of the more surprising rookies as far as the running back position in 2026 because of the toughness, because of the versatility, the hands, and you mentioned the speed that really can sneak up on some people. For safeties coming downhill, thinking he's going to go through you. You take one bad angle, he's going to break that arm tackle and take it the distance for a touchdown. I'm pumped to see him this summer, and I'm pumped to see him in his rookie year.
Yeah, very special alpha type player. Let's talk about Grayson Halton. Now we get to day 3, right? Day 3, Niners went Grayson Halton, Carver Willis, Ephesians Prysock, Jaden Duggar, and Enrique Cruz. We already touched on Duggar. But Halton is interesting, and the 49ers basically said that they were looking at a bunch of offensive linemen, and they wanted to see those offensive linemen against the best defensive lines that they went against. And Oklahoma had a really good line. R. Mason Thomas outside, Grayson Halton inside. So they wound up watching a lot of the offensive line prospects they liked by watching the films against the Sooners. And they just fell in love with Grayson Halton watching all those offensive line prospects because Halton is incredibly fast. He wore 56. He moves around like a linebacker, even though he's 295 pounds. They're really hoping that he can step in for Kalia Davis and maybe even be an upgrade. What did you think of Halton coming out of Oklahoma?
Yeah, I'll say this. This is my favorite pick of the Niners.
Really?
I think the entire class. It really is. I could not say enough good things about Grayson Halton. And I think when you look across the NFL, gone are the days, Larry, as you know, you can't just plug in a Vince Wilfork at 365 pounds and say, hey, clog the A and B gaps, and we're going to play off of you. You got to have guys in the middle that can also push the pocket around your edge rushers that are now, of course, getting lighter and lighter and lighter. So I think when you look at Grayson Halton, you mentioned his success in the SEC at Oklahoma wearing the 56. His ability to play 1-tech, 3-tech, bump out to 4-eye, head up on the offensive tackle, that twitch at 300 pounds. I just think his ability to really be an athletic, explosive piece in the middle is only going to free up the guys on the edge. Because when they come to the line of scrimmage, no matter what, it doesn't matter what Grayson did in the SEC at Oklahoma, you got to prove yourself. And there's already some guys, of course, along this Niners front when they're healthy. But now for him as a rookie to come in and really get some opportunities against centers and guards one-on-one, I think he's twitched up. I think he's got outstanding hands. I just think he's a player that fits the modern scheme and Raheem Morris's defense to where, again, you got the guys on the outside. These players on the inside are going to get isolated looks, and I don't expect him to be isolated too long just because of his ability to really explode through a guy's chest plate and get in the quarterback's feet and make him move off their spot and fall right into the lap, really, of Mykel Williams and Nick Bosa. He's my favorite pick of this draft for John Lynch. I think he's going to be a heck of a football player and a heck of a grab there on early portions of day 3.
Yeah, I mean, Halton and Odigizua give the 49ers 2 interior rushers. And as you said it, I mean, it used to be where you could, have these run stuffers, the Gilbert Browns and these guys that really didn't rush the passer at all. We're in a different era. It's almost like NBA basketball where everybody's got to be a shooter. It's like everybody on that defensive line's got to have some pass rush ability. If you put a guy out there that has no pass rush ability, they're just going to drop that guy. They're not going to block him. I mean, they're just going to basically drop in and try to help on everybody else. And so you got to have those interior rushers, and the Niners got a couple of them. What do you think of the O-linemen they got? They got Carver Willis out of Washington, who's a left tackle, who's more of a guard in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And they got Enrique Cruz out of Kansas, who's got some crazy measurables. Although the tape, I don't know if he's got the tape to match. What do you think of those 2 linemen? They took one in the 4th, one in the 5th.
Yeah, with Carver, the run tape for Carver, I think it was up there. I mean, the best tape for me in this class was Keelan Rutledge, who, of course, went on night 1 to the Houston Texans. But when I look at Carver, his ability in this scheme as a zone-based blocker, it's very impressive. His run fits, the ability to get up to the second level, duo block with a combination with a guard, or what he did at Kansas State in the past, and then, of course, at Washington in his final season. I think he's someone that will be that rotational piece in the middle that could really, if in a pinch, I think he could also play all 5 spots along the offensive line. I think that versatility is very important. But again, I think his snaps will come at the guard spot. And then with Enrique Cruz, middle portions of day 3, you mentioned the athletic traits really off the charts. If he can figure it out as a football player, and I think you can mask some of those inefficiencies technically with him as far as the punch timing, the hand placement, the footwork against varying body types, that stuff will come down the line. Yes, you'd like to see him get some snaps in the regular season again and see what you have. But again, this is a mid-day 3 pick. You like the traits. Good on Kansas, to where it's always been a basketball school. Now they're consistently having NFL players getting drafted, so the program's continuing to rise there. Good for them. But Enrique Cruz is going to be a developmental type of player, or again, going to be that swing type of tackle maybe in the next few years of his career.
Yeah, I could see him even being used, with Kittle out in this year as a blocking tight end, maybe a little bit. Yeah. I could see that. What about Ephesians Prysock? He's probably the one guy that, even though they took him in the 4th round, and his Ray Brown told me that he's very smart. God knows he's got great size and speed. I just didn't see it when I watched the film. I see a guy that struggles in transition and has a hard time mirroring receivers up and down the field. He's got awesome length, right? Him and Takario Davis were just a great, maybe the longest college corner tandem I've ever seen. What do you think of Prysock, and what do you think of him at the next level?
Yeah, the biggest thing, you kind of mentioned it, Larry, is really the ability that he plays very high. When you have those high-hipped players, I mean, for those out there, think about Reek Woolen, just as far as, he's not the athlete of Reek, but when you have those high-hipped players and long legs, sometimes just the transitions to be able to get out of breaks, countering a lot of these quick-footed receivers in the NFC West, I think he's going to have some trouble there. And I think, honestly, Larry, if I look at this defense and I look where maybe I'm asking a question here, if Renardo Green or Diamador Lenore potentially miss a game or 2, you're asking Ephesians Prysock to really step into some major snaps potentially. Or, of course, Jack Jones, they brought over, who's still an underrated corner for me. He's had some really nice snaps at his multiple stops in the past. But for Prysock, again, that's a long physical corner that is more so your atypical cover 3 guy, where you play 7 yards off the ball, read what's in front of you, and go make a play through the hands of the receiver. I do want to see more work in the transitions. I do want to see him downhill as a tackler. He's too big to be just below average, in my opinion, as far as a tackler in open space. Now, not drafting a guy at that size at the corner spot to tackle would have drafted a linebacker, but you need him to cover the transitions he's got to work on. But I think as time goes on, he's a rotational piece there in that secondary. I really like the young pieces they have, specifically with Green and with our guy Upton Stout at nickel, who I know we talked about a bunch in the past. I just think it's going to take a little time there with Ephesians because a long physical player that just has to continue to develop.
All right, let's jump into our Prize Picks lineup for today. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app, and the reason I like it, it is simple. You're just picking more or less on player stats or game outcomes. You build your lineup and you're in. No complicated stuff. Just what you think is going to happen in the game. So use code HMA, play $5 and get $50 in lineups instantly. The link is in the description. All right, let's get into it. And for this one, we're going to go 4-pick power play. I'm going Joe Burrow under 3,874.5 passing yards. I think they're going to have a stronger run game this year. I like Matthew Stafford under 30.5 passing touchdowns at his age. I think there's an injury potential for this year. Sam Darnold, I'm going under 3,674.5 passing yards. Also think there'll be some more adversity for Darnold this year. And I like Ashton Genty to really break out. I think the Raiders are an improved football team. I like Ashton Genty to score at least 8 rushing touchdowns. So we go 4-pick power play. If we go 4 for 4, our $5 turns into $50. Thank you to Prize Picks for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. We're talking to Ryan Fowler on the UMA guest line as we chop it up on the 49ers here on Niners Nightly. Niners do a really good job after the draft, and I thought they had a very good post, undrafted free agent group this year on defense, especially. Mikhail Kamara from Indiana. I mean, he had the key blocked punt in the Natty. Bryce Neeson, Tennessee. James Thompson, who finished at Illinois but was at Wisconsin. Niners feel like they got 2 draftable defensive tackles after the draft. Chris Kaceric's really excited about those guys. They also got Jalen Stroman, a safety out of Notre Dame, and maybe one of the most interesting guys we've seen on the practice field is this Arkansas safety linebacker hybrid player, Larry Worth III. Any of those guys stand out to you in the pre-draft lead up? Because all those guys have looked pretty good on the practice field.
Yeah, I loved Mikhail coming out of Indiana even last year when he could have declared, and I thought he would have been a pick actually in 2025. But of course, he stayed. He won a national championship. There were so many darn good players in the Indiana defense, but he really did set the tone, of course, as another guy that followed Cignetti from James Madison. I think he's someone right now that's a little bit of a long shot, of course, to make the roster, but he's just someone in college that you couldn't keep off the field. And if he continues to show up in the summer, and every single year, multiple teams always have those training camp darlings, preseason darlings that show up as a UDFA, and that's a guy you're just taking a flyer on. So definitely going to keep an eye on him this summer. And I think I'll even hop over to the offensive side of the ball after I talk about James Thompson Jr. here, because James, he mentioned it from Illinois. I don't know if there was a more impressive player for me watching at East West Shrine than James Thompson, right? A big, long, physical player that it's just not easy to teach. You can't teach those traits that he has. And as far as just ability to play on early downs and get off blocks and maybe provide some alignment versatility, again, a lot of names there, but could he outplay an Evan Anderson or Sebastian Valdez, another UDFA from last year, I believe? I think James Thompson is a guy that could possibly do that. So liked him. And then on offense, Larry, I did want to mention Will Pauling, because when they signed him, I thought he was a guy that could make a roster. So I know this receivers group has some guys. You draft Dejon early on day 2. What is Demarcus Robinson going to be? I mentioned Jordan Watkins and Jacob Cowing earlier, but I'm really interested to see what the role could be for Will Pauling in 2026 for San Francisco. I think he's going to be on the roster. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, but I would not be shocked if he surprises some people and makes the initial 53 heading into the season, because I think he's a dynamic football player that can do a lot of things for you within an offensive structure.
Do you like him as a return man? Because he was catching punts, and I was watching it on the Jugs gun. They shoot that thing a million feet into the air, and it's like it's bringing rain. But I love the way he caught the ball. He plucks it with his hands. He didn't have any drops. I think when I was watching the guys catching the punts, he might have been the only guy that didn't have a drop. How sure-handed of a punt returner is he?
I think that's really where he's going to make his money, Larry, in the NFL. Watching him at Notre Dame, watching him at Wisconsin, usually for an NFL roster, if they want to keep 6 receivers, usually that 6th guy, maybe that designated primary punt returner or a guy that can do a little bit of everything for you. That's really where Will's going to make his mark, is going to be as a punt returner, kick returner, ability to flip the field a little bit. Because if you look at the receiver group, maybe you could throw back Cowing, of course, Jordan Watkins, maybe a little bit, but you're not going to see Mike Evans, of course, back there, Ricky Pearsall, Christian Kirk. You could, of course, but you're likely not going to. So that's really where Will Pauling, I expect him to make his mark, is as a return man.
Yeah, it's funny. He had a bunch of drops at Wisconsin, but then he only had 2 drops all year at Notre Dame. Obviously, he improved his ball skills, but you're right. He's an interesting player. He really is. Because he produced in 2 different programs. He's coming off a year. I mean, you're talking about a guy with 4.37 speed, 42-inch vertical, and he scored 6 touchdowns this year for the Golden Domers. So, it's not like this. It's not like just some guy who showed up at the combine or something and ran some blistering time. Or this guy's a pretty good football player.
No, he is. And I think every year, Larry, you can go into camp and say, okay, here's my gist of what the roster is going to look like. But there are always surprises. And that's what the most fun is. I like mini camp in this time of year, Larry, but when you get the pads on and you start to compete a little bit and you really see these guys play, you're going to see the experience of a Will Pauling, I expect, from Notre Dame, from Wisconsin, coming from that Marcus Freeman program where expectations for who you are on the field and off the field, also to have carry himself as a professional, who is he going to be in the locker room? That's going to matter, I believe, in San Francisco. So, again, not major expectations here, but just a name to watch this summer. I think he's going to really just showcase his ability as a guy, again, multiple big-time programs, just could surprise some folks.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are some receivers are a little bit more advanced as far as their ball skills and that kind of thing, and those guys typically shine. Give you another example. We mentioned the tweet where you have Jaden Duggar as a standout. One of the other standouts you had here was Antonio Williams with the Commanders. And let's hit on 2 topics before we get out of here. One, the Aiyuk to the Commanders thing is obviously, there's been so much talk about that. I just kind of wondering, do you think if Aiyuk is diminished at all from what he was here, is he even going to make the Commanders? I mean, the Commanders seem pretty loaded at receiver right now. They've got McCaffrey's brother. They've got, obviously, Terry McLaurin. They just drafted this kid, Antonio Williams. They brought in Van Jefferson. They brought back De'Ami Brown. I mean, there's other guys there. I mean, and they didn't bring back Debo, who was their leading receiver in a lot of categories last year. What do you make of the Aiyuk videos and all the talk, and do we even know if the Commanders are for sure interested?
Yeah, everything I've heard out of Washington, I'll say this, Larry, with Adam Peters, it used to be in Washington to where everything wasn't hard to access. But I'll say this, and I'll give credit to those in Washington. They keep tight lips out there in Ashburn, is where their facility is, Northern Virginia. I would say right now, this situation with Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, heck of a football player when he's healthy, but I think it's getting a little messy is really the best way to describe it. And I know the Instagram stories, the reels, the connection from Brandon Aiyuk, of course, with Jaden Daniels. You mentioned the depth chart in Washington. I just don't see right now. Of course, talent-wise, I think Brandon Aiyuk trumps a lot of the players that you mentioned. Sure. They obviously love Terry McLaurin. Antonio Williams is going to have a big season, I expect, in year 1. They really do like De'Ami Brown, bringing him back from Jacksonville after really a pit stop there. But when you look at Brandon Aiyuk right now, I just don't see a legitimate fit on that roster, both as a player and really what they're looking for as far as an individual. Now, I'm not trying to just flack on Brandon Aiyuk's character potentially, but they're not too big in the, hey, I'm on Instagram and I got another team's hat on and I'm just sending videos out every single day and I want to be a Commander, this and that. I just don't expect that to be a fit right now with Washington. Now, could it happen? Sure. But I just don't expect that right now with the depth chart that they have, the expectations that they have with Jaden Daniels and his experience with the receivers that they already have in town. I know their friendship is there, but a friendship and a relationship shouldn't get someone just, hey, we'll bring you on in Washington. I just don't see that right now. I think it's a little bit of a long shot, despite what we've heard.
Wow. Let's finish with the Eagles. Since you're there in Philly, your new job is at NBC in Philadelphia. I was in Philly with my son for Niners Eagles in the playoffs. What an incredible win that was for the 49ers to go into that. I mean, it's just a lion's den. The fans are going crazy. It was cold. It was windy. George Kittle goes out in the first quarter. The Niners roll in without many of their stars, and they knocked off the world champion Eagles. And that it kind of revealed that the Eagles had a lot of dysfunction, with their offensive coordinator. Now they got Sean Mannion as the new offensive coordinator. I think like the 5th or 6th new OC for Jalen Hurts. They brought in Eli Stowers, a couple big offensive linemen in Markel Bell and Micah Morris. They brought in Mekhi Lemon from USC. I mean, this is a team that's added quite a bit. They traded A.J. Brown to the Patriots, and they added some stuff on defense as well. Jonathan Greenard, heck, you just tweeted about it. A.J. Espinosa comes in. What's your vibe on the Eagles coming into the year?
Yeah, they got to be better on offense. I think that's obviously the blanket statement that's covered this entire region for the past, 5 or 6 months since Sean Mannion was hired. But that's really what the expectation is. This is an unbelievably huge year for Jalen Hurts in this offense. If they make it work, then he's the guy for the future. If they're not a team that is a top 2 spot, of course, in the NFC East, and they're in the playoffs, and maybe the floor for them is the NFC title game. I think you move into 2027 with a potentially new guy under center for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I look at Howie Roseman. Wow. Yeah, I look at a guy, Howie Roseman, Larry, and their GM, where obviously he continues to look elsewhere as far as constantly improving. They bring in Greenard, as you mentioned, on defense. That defense I expect to be a top 3 or 4 unit in a lot of categories. But if this Eagles offense can't score more than 21 a game, there are going to be a lot of questions here. And there are consistent pieces. I mean, Saquon Barkley, they got to get back to him running the football. I don't ever expect him to get back to what he was in 2024. But you just mentioned drafting Mekhi Lemon on night 1. You bring in Eli Stowers. Dallas Goedert is back. I still like Dontavian Wicks coming over from Green Bay. He's got experience in the Sean Mannion offense. He's going to ask, as far as Jalen Hurts' perspective, he's going to be asked to do some different things under center this year, turning his back to a defense. They want him to target the middle of the field a little bit more with consistency. But all the faces and all the places are there, on top of having a top 3 to 4 offensive line when healthy, of course, in football. There are no excuses for Jalen Hurts this year. And I think the biggest thing right now, when I look at Jalen Hurts, when I compare him to other quarterbacks around the league, are you winning games because of Jalen Hurts, or are you winning games with Jalen Hurts? And I think right now the Eagles in the past have won games with Jalen Hurts. If they can win a few games this year because of him stepping up in big-time moments, making some even more big-time throws and utilizing his legs, I think he's going to be a guy there for the future. But again, will not be shocked if he doesn't meet expectation this year internally, that 2027, there's a new quarterback under center in Philadelphia.
Wow. There's a lot of talk that they would trade Tanner McKee, but you're thinking they're going to keep McKee and maybe move Hurts.
Potentially they may move McKee. That is still a question. Him and Andy Dalton have really been going back and forth in that QB2 role. But I think moving forward into next year, there is a potential there. Absolutely. There's a lot of talk internally here in Philadelphia about what can go on there. More so that's what's been public. It's an unbelievably massive year for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, no question about it. Who's been the talk of their mini camp, by the way? And they got Reek Woolen's there. They got Ebiketie, they got Greener. They've added a number of different players, veteran players. They've also had a pretty good draft. Anybody been the talk of the mini there?
Yeah, you mentioned it. Reek Woolen has really been the talk of the town, and he's going to be tested this year. Of course, they have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and he's going to be a guy that faces a ton of targets this year. As a rookie in Seattle, he was a runner-up for Defensive Rookie of the Year that year. Coming out of UTSA, he's someone that's been able to marry that elite athletic profile and football player and marriage that to when you have a heck of a young man. He's a little bit different as far as the body type and what they have on the outside, but he's been someone that's consistently made play after play after play. So he's really been the talk of minicamp. They're not going to regroup until training camp in about 6 weeks or so. But a funny story as well, as far as, when you think about minicamp, you think about guys that are high round picks or big time free agents like Reek Woolen was. But really, Larry, the talk of minicamp here in Philadelphia was their late 7th round pick in Uwar Bernard from Nigeria. The kid that's had the unbelievably Herculean type of athletic profile. And he's really going to be in that Jordan Mailata 3 or 4 year path to potentially come in and be a maybe rotational piece here. And we're not talking that until maybe 2028, 2029 or further. So he's really been the talk of Philadelphia in this minicamp series, again, on top of Reek Woolen.
It's funny that you mentioned Uwar Bernard. So Howie Roseman is widely considered to be a top tier GM, if not the best. And he took not just Uwar Bernard, he also took the other guy, Josh Weeru.
Yeah.
Now, these guys are part of the NFL's International Pathway Program. So you can carry an extra roster spot all season long for one of these IPP players. Many of them are guys that are they're not really even contending for roster spots. The Eagles now have 2 guys. Weeru's a ridiculously athletic edge rusher, and Uwar Bernard is maybe the most athletic 306-pound man the league's ever seen. And these guys are really, really, really athletic, like off the charts athletic, but they're also really, really, really raw. Those will be two guys to watch for this summer for sure in the preseason, huh?
Oh, absolutely. And I think really the focus, Weru was a guy that's come through the program, as you mentioned, with UR, and I think they're trying to keep them obviously together. And UR somewhere, he's thousands of miles away from home. And you mentioned the athletic profile, but I think the biggest thing to even provide some context to this edition, because there's even some folks in Philadelphia, the fan base around this area and how they can get, or really any fan base. But when you see athletic freaks like this, you think, oh my gosh, how in the world is this guy not going to be good? Well, I think you'd even sit back and ask the question, hey, here's Myles Garrett, but think about Myles Garrett if he never played football. Would you draft him? I would. So that's how you think about Uar Bernard. This is going to take time. The young man has never played a single snap of football. So there's a long road for him to ever think that he's going to get on an NFL football field and play meaningful snaps. But here's the thing, too, is that if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. It's an IDP player. You keep him on to establish him or try to work with him for the next 3 to 4 years. Clint Hurt, defensive line coach in Philadelphia, probably their future defensive coordinator when Vic Fangio leaves. He's probably a guy that, hey, look, I want to have my fingerprints on him and work with him every single day for the next 3-4 years, exactly what they did with Jordan Mailata. So it's going to take time, but what a story. And you mentioned as far as the most athletic 306-pounder in the NFL, I would even argue he's potentially the most athletically gifted 306-pounder on earth, Larry. He's an unbelievable athlete.
Yeah, no, I mean, to see what these guys look like eventually and how they develop. I mean, this could open a door for a lot of people, a lot of prospects. Yeah. I think there's a lot of scouts out there that are really keeping a close eye on those two guys in particular. Ryan, awesome stuff. We always, love having you on KNBR. Once again, he's a great follow on X @_Ryan Fowler _ NFL draft for NBC Sports now in Philadelphia. Ryan, thanks for jumping on the leader, man. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, Larry. We'll talk soon.
Niners Nightly continues next with more on the Sports Leader.